Fly this helicopter, and I'll marry you. The CEO's voice cuts through the night air like a blade. 200 guests stand on the rooftop of Chicago's glass tower. Champagne flutes reflecting the floodlights that illuminate a $12 million helicopter gleaming on the helipad beside them. The woman who just spoke, blonde, designer gown, smile sharp as broken glass gestures toward the pearl-white Airbus like it's a carnival prize. The man she's talking to wears a janitor's coveralls. His name doesn't matter yet. What matters is the way every camera in the crowd swings toward him. What matters is the laughter rippling through the guests. What matters is the way this woman, Vanessa Kincaid, CEO of the hotel empire beneath their feet, stands beside a portable wedding altar, complete with an officiant, like this is all some elegant joke. But the janitor isn't laughing. He's tall, lean, dark-skinned, with silver threading through his short locks and hands that bear the kind of scars you don't get from mopping floors. He stands perfectly still as Vanessa climbs into the helicopter, champagne in hand, utterly certain he'll refuse. Utterly certain he'll fail. The rotors begin to spin. And that's when the head of security, a former Marine pilot who ran a background check 3 days ago, realizes he's made a terrible mistake not stopping this. Because the way this man's hands move across the controls isn't hesitant. It's not uncertain. It's the muscle memory of someone who's done this 1,000 times before. In storms, in war zones, in places where one mistake means people die. The helicopter lifts off the pad without a tremor. Vanessa's smile falters. The crowd goes silent. And in that moment, every single person watching realizes the same thing. They have no idea who this man really is. If you believe that true power isn't found in titles or wealth, but in the quiet strength of people the world overlooks, stay with this story. Because what happens when that helicopter lands will expose the cruelest lie this woman ever told. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were better than you? But to understand how a decorated Coast Guard rescue pilot ended up mopping floors in a luxury hotel and why the woman who just humiliated him is about to regret every word she said, we need to go back 5 days to a basement corridor where invisible men do invisible work. The fluorescent lights in the basement of the glass tower buzzed like insects trapped in glass. Antoine Rivers swiped his badge at 4:15 a.m., the scanner beeping twice before the time clock accepted it. Monday morning, the start of another week that would look exactly like the last. He pulled his cleaning cart from the supply closet and began his route. The basement smelled like concrete and machine oil. Somewhere deep in the walls, pipes rattled and groaned. Antoine moved through the corridors with the efficiency of a man who had mapped every inch of the space in his muscle memory. Trash bins, grease traps behind the kitchen, service elevators that needed mopping after the weekend crowd. He was tall and lean, his dark brown skin catching the harsh light as he worked. Silver threaded through his short locks. His hands, scarred and rough, gripped the mop handle with the kind of steadiness that came from doing the same task 1,000 times. No one spoke to him. That was fine. He preferred it that way. At 5:30 a.m., the overnight kitchen staff began filtering in. Antoine wheeled his cart past the prep stations, emptying the bins filled with vegetable scraps and coffee grounds. Maria, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour permanently dusted on her apron, waved him over. "Coffee?" she asked in Spanish. "Thank you," Antoine said. He took the cup she offered. They stood in companionable silence for a moment. Maria knew better than to ask questions. She worked overnights long enough to recognize the people who came to this shift because they needed the extra $1 an hour. The people who had reasons not to be seen during the day. "Cold today," Maria said. "Yeah," she nodded and went back to her dough. Antoine finished the coffee, rinsed the cup, and returned to his cart. The morning passed in silence. He scrubbed. He mopped. He emptied. At 7 a.m., the executive floors began to wake up. Men in tailored suits stepped out of elevators, talking on phones, holding briefcases. Women in heels clicked past, holding lattes and leather portfolios. None of them looked at him. Antoine pushed his cart into a service corridor and waited for them to pass. It was easier that way. Invisible. By 2 p.m., his shift was done. He clocked out, changed into a plain gray hoodie and jeans in the staff locker room, and walked out into the Chicago afternoon. The sunlight felt too bright after 10 hours underground. His car was a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a crack across the windshield. It started on the third try. He drove south through the city, past the high-rises and into the neighborhoods where the buildings got smaller and the paint started to peel. Pilsen, his neighborhood, the place where people like him could still afford rent. He pulled up outside Zoe's school at 20:45 p.m., same as always. She came running out the front doors at 3002, backpack bouncing, her natural hair pulled into two puffs that had started to come loose during the day. She was small for 9, with dark eyes that missed nothing. "Dad!" She yanked open the passenger door and climbed in. "Guess what happened in science today?" Antoine smiled. It was the first time his face had changed expression all day. "What happened?" "Mr. Peterson let us build catapults out of popsicle sticks and rubber bands, and we launched marshmallows across the room, and mine went the farthest because I calculated the trajectory and—" She talked the entire drive. Antoine listened. He asked questions. He let her energy fill the car. "Can we go to the library?" Zoe asked as they pulled onto their street. Yeah. The library was small, tucked between a laundromat and a corner store. Zoe went straight to the science section. She came back 10 minutes later with 3 books, all of them too advanced for a 4th grader. Antoine checked them out with his library card. On the drive home, Zoe flipped through one of the books. "This one's about aerospace engineering," she said. "Did you know helicopters use something called cyclic and collective pitch to control the rotor blades?" "I didn't know that," Antoine lied. "You never talk about stuff like this," Zoe said. She looked up at him. "Did you ever want to fly when you were a kid?" Antoine's hands tightened on the wheel. "Just slightly. Just for a second." "Everyone wants to fly when they're a kid," he said. "But did you?" "Yeah, I did." "So why didn't you?" He pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex. "Life doesn't always go the way you plan, baby girl." Zoe frowned, unsatisfied, but she didn't push. Not yet. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a closet. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing next door, but it was clean, it was safe, it was theirs. Zoe spread her homework across the kitchen table. Antoine made dinner, chicken and rice, simple, cheap. They ate together. Zoe told him about the catapult competition again, this time with more detail. Antoine nodded in all the right places. After dinner, Zoe did her math homework while Antoine washed the dishes. By 8 p.m., she was yawning. "Bed," he said. 5 more minutes. "Now." She groaned, but got up. She brushed her teeth, changed into her pajamas, and climbed into bed with one of the library books. Antoine sat on the edge of her mattress. "Read to me?" she asked. "You're too old for that." "No, I'm not." He smiled. He picked up the book. It was about the physics of rotor flight. He read 3 pages before her breathing slowed and her eyes closed. Antoine set the book down gently. He stood. He turned off the light. But as he reached the door, he glanced back. The book had fallen open on Zoe's chest. The chapter title was visible in the dim light from the hallway, The Physics of Rotor Flight. Antoine's hands began to shake, just slightly, just enough. He closed the door and walked away. Vanessa Kincaid's office occupied the 58th floor of the glass tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. The furniture was white leather and chrome. Everything in the room cost more than most people made in a year. She stood at her desk Tuesday afternoon, reviewing seating charts for Friday's gala. Her assistant, Jennifer, hovered nearby with a tablet. "The Hendersons need to be moved," Vanessa said. "They can't sit next to the Chens. There was an issue at the opera fundraiser last month." "I'll adjust it," Jennifer said. "And the ice sculptures. Did we confirm the swans?" "Yes. They'll arrive Friday at 4. Vanessa tapped her pen against the chart. "What about the champagne?" "Dom Perignon, 2 cases, plus the reserve bottles for the VIP lounge. Make it 3 cases. I don't want to run out." Jennifer made a note. She was 26, efficient, and terrified of making mistakes. Vanessa liked it that way. "The photographer will be here at 5 to document the setup," Jennifer continued. "The Tribune crew arrives at 6 for the main event." "And the caterers." "The guest list," Vanessa interrupted. "How many confirmed?" 192. "We need 200. It looks better in photos. Call the backup list." Jennifer nodded and left. Vanessa returned to the seating chart. Everything had to be perfect. This gala was for the Children's Hospital Foundation, But it was also about her, about proving she belonged at the top of this building, that she wasn't just the woman who married into the Kincaid name. A knock at the door. Caleb Reed, head of security, stepped inside. He was in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with the kind of posture that came from military service. "Miss Kincaid," he said, "we need to discuss the rooftop access protocols for Friday." "It's handled," Vanessa said without looking up. "With this many guests, we should limit elevator access and—" "Caleb," I said, "it's handled. The event planners have it covered." He paused. "There's also a concern about the helicopter. If we're bringing VIPs in by air, we need to coordinate with—" "The helicopter is polished and ready. I checked it myself this morning." Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about airspace clearance and—" Vanessa looked up. Her expression was cold. "Is there a problem, Caleb?" "No, ma'am." "Then we're done here." He left without another word. Vanessa exhaled. Men like Caleb always thought they knew better, always thought their experience made them indispensable. She'd been managing just fine without his input. She picked up her phone and called down to maintenance. "This is Ms. Kincaid. I need someone on the rooftop in 10 minutes. I want to inspect the helipad." 10 minutes later, she stood on the rooftop. The wind was sharp this high up. The city spread out below her like a kingdom. The Airbus H-45 sat on the helipad, pearl white and gleaming. $12 million of machinery. A symbol. The maintenance supervisor, a man named Torres, waited beside it. "Does it sparkle?" Vanessa asked. "Yes, ma'am. We detailed it this morning." "Detail it again. I want it perfect for Friday. VIPs will be arriving by air." "Understood." She walked around the helicopter, inspecting every surface. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished fuselage. Blonde hair perfectly styled, designer suit, the image of success. But all she could see were the cracks. Back in her office an hour later, her phone rang. The screen showed a name she didn't want to see. Richard Holbrook, board member. Old money. The kind of man who'd never believed she deserved this position. She answered. "Richard, Vanessa, I'm looking at the quarterly budget report." "And?" "The hospitality expenses are up 18% from last quarter. Care to explain?" "We're investing in guest experience. Bought premium amenities. It's part of my vision for your vision is expensive." Her fingers tightened around the phone. "The occupancy rate is up 12% year over year. Revenue is. Revenue isn't the issue. Cost management is. The board expects fiscal responsibility, not vanity projects." "This isn't vanity. This is strategy. We'll see. I'll bring it up at the next meeting." The line went dead. Vanessa set the phone down slowly. Her hand was shaking. She hated that. Hated that. Hated that Richard could still make her feel small. Make her feel like the girl who'd married into money instead of earning it. She'd show them. Friday's gala would be flawless. The photos would be in every society column. The donations would exceed projections, and Richard Holbrook would have nothing to say. The afternoon bled into evening. Staff came and went. Decisions were made. By 7 o'clock, Vanessa was alone in her office. The city lights glittered below. The building had gone quiet. She opened her laptop and pulled up the society pages. There were photos from last month's charity auction. Vanessa in a red gown, smiling beside the mayor. Vanessa cutting the ribbon at the new hotel spa. Vanessa, Vanessa, Vanessa. She scrolled through the comments. Most were generic. Compliments on her dress. Praise. But then she saw one that made her stop. It was on a photo from the opera fundraiser. Vanessa standing beside her husband, Charles Kincaid. He was older, silver-haired, distracted. The comment was small, almost buried in the thread. Hotel heiress or trophy wife? Vanessa stared at the words. Her jaw locked. Her breath went shallow. She closed the laptop. Hard. The screen went dark. Hard the screen went dark. Her reflection stared back at her from the black glass. And for just a moment, in the silence of her perfect office, Vanessa Kincaid looked exactly like what she'd spent 10 years trying not to be. Afraid, Friday. Antoine wheeled his cleaning cart through the service corridor on the 42nd floor. The gala setup had left debris everywhere. Crushed napkins, empty packing crates, tape and zip ties scattered across the concrete. He worked methodically, bagged the trash, flattened the boxes, moved to the next section. The service elevator at the end of the hall was crowded with equipment. Rolling racks, audio cables, a flatbed cart loaded with champagne cases. Antoine glanced at his watch. 6 o'clock. The event crew would be clearing out soon. He could wait, but the elevator dinged. The doors opened. More equipment rolled out. Antoine pushed his cart forward to collect the empty boxes they'd left behind. He didn't see the photographer until it was too late. The corridor was narrow. His cart blocked the path, and standing behind it, face already tight with irritation, was Vanessa Kincaid. She wore a cream-colored suit. Her hair was perfect. The photographer beside her held a camera, mid-shot. "Excuse me," Vanessa said. Her voice was sharp. "What are you doing?" Antoine looked up. "Cleaning, ma'am. I'll move. You're in the way during my event. I'm sorry." "I didn't know you were." "Of course you didn't know. That's the problem." She gestured at the cart. "This is a VIP preparation. Do you understand what that means?" Antoine gripped the cart handle. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you?" Her voice rose. "Because it looks like you just roll through whenever you feel like it without thinking about who else might need this space." The photographer lowered his camera. Uncomfortable. Antoine began pulling the cart backward. "I'm moving it now." "Don't move it. Follow me." "Ma'am," I said. "Follow me." Vanessa turned to the photographer. "Keep shooting." She walked toward the elevator. Antoine stood frozen. The photographer gave him an apologetic look and followed her. Vanessa turned back. Did I stutter? Antoine left his cart. He followed. The elevator ride was silent. Vanessa stood with her arms crossed. The photographer pretended to check his camera settings. Antoine kept his eyes on the floor numbers. 56, 56th and 58. The doors opened on the rooftop. The space was transformed. String lights crisscrossed overhead. Tables draped in white linen. A bar stocked with premium liquor. Ice sculptures gleaming under floodlights. And in the center of it all, the Airbus H-45 helicopter, polished until it looked like molten pearl. The event staff moved through the space, adjusting chairs and testing microphones. A handful of early guests stood near the bar, already holding champagne flutes. Vanessa walked out onto the rooftop. Antoine followed. "Everyone," Vanessa called out. Her voice carried. "I want you to meet someone." The staff looked up. The early guests turned. Vanessa gestured to Antoine. "This is one of our custodial staff. He just interrupted my photo shoot because he doesn't understand how events work." A few people shifted uncomfortably. The photographer kept his camera up. Antoine said nothing. "I thought it would be educational," Vanessa continued, "for him to see what real work looks like, what it takes to prepare an event like this, so he understands why we can't have people rolling carts through service corridors during setup." A woman from the event crew spoke up quietly. "Miss Kincaid, we can." "It's fine," Vanessa said. "It's a teaching moment." She looked at Antoine. "What's your name?" "Antoine." "Antoine. Do you know how much this event cost to put together?" He met her eyes. "No, ma'am." "Over $200,000. The flowers alone were $15,000. Do you understand that?" "Yes, ma'am. Do you?" She was performing now, feeding off the attention. "Because you make what, $30,000 a year, maybe less. So this event represents almost 7 years of your salary, and you almost disrupted it because you couldn't wait 5 minutes for a hallway to clear." Antoine's jaw tightened. His hands stayed at his sides. One of the early guests whispered to another. The photographer kept shooting. Vanessa turned, scanning the rooftop as if looking for something. Her eyes landed on the helicopter. The floodlights made it glow. She walked toward it. "You know what this is, Antoine?" "A helicopter." "Not just a helicopter. This is a custom Airbus H-145. $12 million. We use it to ferry VIP guests from O'Hare." She ran her hand along the fuselage. "You've probably never been in a helicopter, have you?" Antoine didn't answer. Vanessa smiled. "It wasn't kind. Tell you what. You want to be useful? Fly this helicopter, take me around the skyline." She paused. "Do that, and I'll marry you. I'll make you head of operations." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Nervous at first, then louder when they realized she was serious. The photographer's camera clicked. Rapid fire. Vanessa turned to the assembled guests, her voice bright. "I mean it. I'll marry him. Right here tonight, if he can fly this thing." More laughter. Someone pulled out a phone. Started recording. Antoine stood perfectly still. His dark skin caught the floodlights. His coveralls were stained from a week of work. His hands, scarred and rough, hung loose at his sides. Vanessa waited for a response, for him to laugh it off, to apologize, to shrink. He did none of those things. Not with anger, not with fear, with something she couldn't read. Then he turned, walked back to the elevator, left his cleaning cart behind. The laughter died down. Guests exchanged glances. The photographer lowered his camera. Vanessa stood beside the helicopter, suddenly aware that the moment had shifted in a way she hadn't intended. But the phone cameras were still recording, so she smiled, waved her hand dismissively. All right, back to work, everyone. Let's make this gala perfect. The service elevator descended. Antoine stood alone inside, his reflection fractured across the polished steel doors. His hands were shaking. His breathing was controlled, measured, the way it used to be before a storm. And in the distorted reflection, for just a moment, he didn't look like a janitor at all. Antoine pushed open the apartment door at 10:47 p.m. The living room light was on. Zoe sat on the couch in her pajamas, phone in hand, still awake. Hey, baby girl, he said. You should be asleep. She looked up. Her face wasn't tired. It was angry. I saw the video, she said. Antoine stopped. He set his keys on the counter. What video? Don't lie to me, Dad. Zoe turned her phone around. The screen showed him standing on the rooftop, Vanessa gesturing at the helicopter, guests laughing in the background. The clip had been trimmed to 30 seconds. Just the worst parts. Mia's mom was there, Zoe said. She sent it to the other parents. Now everyone's seen it. Antoine walked to the couch, sat down slowly. I'm sorry you had to see that. Why didn't you say anything? It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Zoe's voice was rising. She was 9 years old and small for her age, but right now she looked fierce. That lady was mean to you in front of everyone, and you just stood there. Why do you let people treat you like nothing? Zoe, you always do this. You act like you're invisible, like you don't matter, but you do matter. Antoine's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say. Zoe wiped her eyes. She wasn't crying, just frustrated. Could you actually fly it? What? The helicopter? Could you fly it? Antoine hesitated. Just for a second, just for a second, just for a second, just long enough. Zoe saw it. Her eyes widened. You could, couldn't you? The silence in the apartment was heavy. The radiator ticked. Someone walked past in the hallway outside. Could you? Antoine looked at his daughter. Her natural hair was pulled back in 2 puffs that had come loose during the day. Her dark eyes were sharp, searching. She'd been asking questions about helicopters for years, reading books, watching documentaries, and he'd been deflecting every time she asked about his past. Yeah, he said finally. I could. Zoe stared at him. Then why didn't you tell her that? Because it's complicated. How is it complicated? She was wrong about you. You should have told her. Antoine rubbed his face. He was exhausted. 10 hours in the basement, the humiliation on the rooftop, and now this. Sit down, he said. Zoe was already sitting, but she pulled her knees to her chest, waiting. Antoine took a breath. He'd kept this buried for 10 years, kept it locked away where Zoe couldn't see it, where he didn't have to look at it himself. Before you were born, he said slowly, I was in the Coast Guard. Zoe's eyes went wide. Really? Yeah, I was a helicopter pilot. A pilot? I flew rescue missions. Storms, hurricanes, people trapped in floods or on sinking boats. That was my job. Zoe's mouth opened. You never told me that. I know. Why not? Antoine looked down at his hand. Scarred, calloused, hands that used to grip a cyclic stick with absolute confidence. Because I stopped, he said. A long time ago. Why? This was the part he couldn't say, not all of it, not yet. Your mom, he said quietly. She was a pilot too. We flew together, and she died in an accident. I was there. I couldn't save her. Zoe went very still. After that, I couldn't save her. Zoe went very still, to keep you safe. So I left the Coast Guard. I came here, and I started over. The radiator ticked again. Zoe's fingers tightened on her knees. Is that why we don't have pictures of her? Zoe asked. Yeah. Because it hurts too much? Antoine nodded. His jaw was locked. If he spoke, his voice would break. Zoe was quiet for a long time. Then she said very softly, "Mom wouldn't want you to hide, Dad." The words hit him like a fist. "She'd want you to be brave," Zoe continued, "not invisible." Antoine couldn't answer. Because she was right, and because Zoe had just said the thing he'd been running from for a decade. Zoe uncurled from the couch. "I'm tired," she said. "I'm going to bed." She walked to her room, paused in the doorway. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, baby girl." She closed the door. Antoine sat alone in the dim living room. The TV was off. The building was quiet. Outside, a car passed on the street, headlights sweeping across the wall. He stood, walked to his bedroom, opened the closet. On the top shelf, pushed to the back, was a cardboard box. He pulled it down, set it on the bed. The tape was old, yellowed. He peeled it off. Inside was everything he'd tried to forget. His flight suit, navy blue, faded at the knees. His name stitched over the chest pocket. A stack of commendations in plastic sleeves, service photos. Him in dress blues, younger, smiling. A patch that read 160th SOAR in red letters. And at the bottom, a photograph. Maya in her flight suit, standing beside an HH-65 Dolphin on the tarmac at Elizabeth City. The sun behind her. Her smile bright and easy. She looked so alive. Antoine picked up the photo. His hands were shaking now. Not from exhaustion, from something else. He stared at Maya's face. At the woman he'd loved. The woman he'd watched die. The woman whose daughter had just asked him to be brave. And for the first time in 10 years, Antoine wondered if running had ever been the answer. Antoine arrived at the glass tower at 3:15 a.m., an hour before his shift started. He didn't go to the basement. He took the elevator to the 58th floor. The executive suite was empty, dark. The cleaning crew had finished hours ago. Antoine stood outside Vanessa Kincaid's office and waited. At 7:30 a.m., the lights came on. Staff began arriving. Vanessa's assistant, Jennifer, stepped off the elevator carrying a coffee and a tablet. She saw Antoine standing by the door in his coveralls. Her face tightened. "Can I help you? I need to speak with Miss Kincaid." "She doesn't take meetings with." Jennifer stopped herself. "You need to go through the proper channels. I'll wait." Jennifer looked at him like he'd lost his mind. But she didn't call security. She just walked into her desk area and pretended he wasn't there. Antoine stood, silent, patient. At 8:15 a.m., Vanessa stepped off the elevator. Designer suit, heels clicking on marble. She was on her phone, mid-conversation, not looking up. Then she saw him. She stopped. Her expression shifted from surprise to something like amusement. She ended the call. "Well," she said, "this is unexpected. I need to talk to you." Vanessa glanced at Jennifer. "It's fine. Give us 5 minutes." She unlocked her office. Antoine followed her inside. The door closed behind them. Vanessa set her bag on her desk. She didn't sit. She stood with her arms crossed, waiting. Antoine met her eyes. His voice was quiet, steady. "I'll do it." "Do what?" "Fly your helicopter." Vanessa blinked. Then she laughed. Not cruelly, just surprised. "You're serious?" "Yes." She studied him. Her smile grew. "Why?" Antoine didn't answer that. "You made an offer." "Already planning." "This is perfect," she muttered. "This is actually perfect." She picked up her phone, dialed. "Jennifer, clear my schedule for the next hour. I need to make some calls." She hung up, looked at Antoine. "Saturday, the main charity gala, 200 guests. The Chicago Tribune is covering it. I'll have you fly then." "Okay, you understand what this means, right? If you can't actually fly, you'll humiliate yourself in front of the entire city." "I understand." Vanessa's smile was sharp. "Good. Be on the rooftop at 6 p.m. Saturday. Don't be late." Antoine turned to leave. "One more thing," Vanessa said. "I'm calling security to supervise this. I don't need a lawsuit if you crash my helicopter." "Fine." He walked out. Jennifer stared as he passed. He didn't look at her. In the elevator, Antoine's hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. He made the decision. There was no going back now. He went to the basement, clocked in, started his shift. By 9 a.m., the word had spread. Vanessa had called Caleb Reed, head of security, into her office. Caleb was 54, broad-shouldered, with gray hair and the kind of posture that came from 20 years in the Marines. He stood in front of Vanessa's desk, arms behind his back. "I need you to supervise something Saturday," Vanessa said. "What am I supervising?" "The janitor. Antoine Rivers. He's going to fly the H-145 during the gala." Caleb's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, you heard me." He accepted my challenge. "I need you to make sure the bird is fueled and prepped, and make sure he doesn't kill anyone if he crashes it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Miss Kincaid, I don't think." "It's handled, Caleb. Just do your job." She dismissed him with a wave. Caleb walked out. His mind was already working. This was insane. Vanessa was letting a janitor fly a $12 million helicopter in front of 200 people because of some joke she'd made on Friday. He found Antoine 2 hours later in the service hallway on the 32nd floor. Antoine was emptying a trash bin. Caleb approached quietly. "Antoine." Antoine looked up. He recognized Caleb from the rooftop Friday. He straightened. "Yes, sir. Can I talk to you for a second?" "Sure." "Can I talk to you for a second?" "Sure." Caleb glanced down the hall. No one around. He lowered his voice, once or twice. Something in the way he said it made Caleb pause. Not defensive, not cocky, just calm, certain. Like a man who'd answered that question before. "You know what you're doing?" Caleb asked. "Yeah. Because if you don't, people could get hurt, including you." "I know." Caleb studied him. Antoine's face was unreadable, but his posture was steady. His hands didn't shake. "All right," Caleb said. "Saturday, 6 p.m. Don't be late." He walked away. But the unease in his chest didn't leave. That afternoon, Caleb sat in his office in the security suite. He pulled up the staff database, found Antoine Rivers. Date of birth. Current address. Employment start date. Nothing unusual. But Caleb had been in the Marines long enough to know when something didn't add up. He opened a separate search, military records database. He typed in the name, Antoine Rivers. The screen loaded, and Caleb's blood went cold. Lieutenant Antoine Rivers, United States Coast Guard, Air Station, Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Service dates, 2001-2015, HH-65, Dolphin Pilot, Rescue Swimmer Aviation Program, Commendations, Medals. A service photo in dress blues. A man 14 years younger with the same dark eyes, the same lean build, the same quiet intensity. Caleb scrolled through the record. Search and rescue missions, hurricane deployments, lives saved, 127. He sat back in his chair. His hands were shaking. This wasn't a janitor. This was one of the best helicopter pilots the Coast Guard had ever produced. He grabbed his phone, dialed Vanessa's office. Voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He stood, walked to the elevator, rode it to the 58th floor. Jennifer looked up as he approached. "She's in a meeting. I need to talk to her now." She said no interruptions. Caleb's voice dropped. "Tell her it's about Saturday. Tell her it's urgent." Jennifer hesitated. Then she picked up her phone, spoke quietly, hung up. "She'll call you back in 20 minutes. Caleb waited in the hallway. 23 minutes later, his phone rang. "What is it, Caleb?" Vanessa sounded annoyed. "We need to talk about the janitor. He's not who you think he is." Vanessa laughed. "Caleb, relax. He's a janitor." Tuesday morning, Vanessa sat at her desk, scrolling through contacts on her phone. She stopped at a name, Reverend Patricia Hollis. Society weddings, high-profile ceremonies. "Perfect," she called. "Patricia, it's Vanessa Kincaid. I need a favor." "Are you free Saturday evening?" The Reverend's voice was warm, professional. "I have a ceremony at 2, but I'm free after 4. What's the occasion?" Vanessa smiled. "It's complicated. I need you on standby for a wedding. It might not happen, but if it does, I need you there." A pause. "Vanessa, I'm not sure I understand." "You will. I'll pay triple your usual rate. Just be at the glass tower rooftop at 6. Wear your vestments and bring your license." She hung up before Patricia could ask more questions. By Wednesday, the altar was being assembled. A simple white arch, 2 floral arrangements, a small platform. The event coordinator, a woman named Sandra, stood on the rooftop with Vanessa, looking confused. "Ms. Kincaid, I'm not clear on the purpose of this. Is someone getting married at the gala?" "Maybe," Vanessa said. "It's a surprise element for the donors. A bit of theater." Sandra didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Understood. Vanessa called the Chicago Tribune that afternoon. She spoke to the lifestyle editor, a woman she'd cultivated over the years through careful press releases and exclusive interviews. Darling, I wanted to give you advance notice. Saturday's gala is going to have something unforgettable. I can't say what yet, but make sure your photographer gets good rooftop shots. Can you give me a hint? Let's just say it involves a challenge, a helicopter, and a very unexpected guest of honor. The editor laughed. You always know how to create a moment, Vanessa. That's the job. Thursday morning, Caleb walked into Vanessa's office without knocking. He carried a folder. His face was tight. We need to talk. Vanessa looked up from her laptop. I'm busy, Caleb. This can't wait. He dropped the folder on her desk. That's Antoine Rivers' service record, Coast Guard helicopter pilot. He flew rescue missions for 14 years. He's the real thing, Vanessa. She opened the folder, scanned the pages, saw the photo of a younger man in dress blues. The same dark eyes, the same lean build. She closed it, pushed it back across the desk. So he used to fly. That was a long time ago. It doesn't just go away. You don't forget how to fly a helicopter. Maybe he flew a desk. Maybe it's a different Antoine Rivers. He mops floors, Caleb. Look at the photo. I looked. It's not enough. Caleb's jaw locked. You're making a mistake. I'm making a statement. This gala is going to be in every paper in Chicago. The hotel's name will be everywhere. That's good for business. And if he actually flies? Vanessa leaned back in her chair. She smiled. Then I'll have the PR event of the year. A janitor who's secretly a hero. A CEO who gave him a second chance. It's perfect either way. You gave your word you'd marry him. It was a joke, Caleb. Everyone knows that. The cameras don't. Vanessa's smile faded. Drop it. That's an order. Caleb stood there for a moment. Then he turned and walked out. In the basement, Antoine moved through his shifts like always, but the other staff noticed the difference. They'd heard about the challenge. Some had seen the original video. Word spread fast in a building this size. Maria cornered him Thursday afternoon in the service corridor. She held a mop, her apron dusted with flour from the morning's baking. Antoine, she said quietly, people are talking. They're saying you're going to fly the helicopter Saturday. He nodded. Are you serious? Yeah. Do you know how? He met her eyes. Yeah. Maria studied his face. She'd worked with him for 5 years. He'd never lied to her. Okay, she said. Be careful. I will. She squeezed his arm. Then she went back to work. That afternoon, in a 4th grade classroom across the city, Zoe raised her hand during social studies. Her teacher, Mrs. Palmer, called on her. Yes, Zoe? Can I be absent Saturday? My dad's doing something important. Mrs. Palmer frowned. What's he doing? Zoe hesitated. Then she said very seriously, he's flying a helicopter. The class giggled. Mrs. Palmer smiled gently. Zoe, I'm sure whatever your dad is doing is important. But you'll need a note from him if you're going to miss school. Zoe nodded. She didn't argue, she just sat back down and waited for the bell. By Friday afternoon, the rooftop was ready. String lights crisscrossed overhead, waiting to be turned on. Tables draped in white linen stood in perfect rows. The bar was stocked. The ice sculptures were being delivered at 4. And in the center of it all, the Airbus H-145 gleamed under the late-day sun, polished until it looked like liquid light. The altar stood 20 feet from the helipad. White flowers. Simple. Elegant. Absurd. Caleb stood at the edge of the rooftop, arms crossed, watching the setup crew make final adjustments. His phone rang. He didn't answer. It was Vanessa. She'd called him 4 times today. He didn't want to hear it anymore. Friday night, after the crew had left and the rooftop was empty, Vanessa took the elevator up one last time. She walked through the space slowly, checked the lighting, ran her hand along a table edge, stood beside the altar and looked at the helicopter. Tomorrow, 200 people would be here. The Tribune would be filming. The city's wealthiest donors would be watching. And a janitor in coveralls would either humiliate himself or do the impossible. Either way, Vanessa would win. She stood there in the silence, imagining the photos, the headlines, the moment when everyone realized she'd orchestrated the entire thing. She smiled. This is going to be perfect, she said aloud. The city stretched out below her. The wind picked up, cold and sharp. And somewhere far below, in the basement of the glass tower, a man with scarred hands finished his shift and went home to his daughter, knowing that in less than 24 hours, everything would change. The glass tower rooftop glowed like a stage. String lights crisscrossed overhead, casting warm light across 200 guests in evening wear. Champagne flutes caught the glow. Conversations hummed. The Chicago skyline stretched behind them, turning gold as the sun dropped toward the lake. Vanessa Kincaid stood near the center of it all, radiant in a midnight blue gown. Her hair was perfect. Her smile was bright. The portable altar stood 20 feet to her left, white flowers framing it like a joke everyone was in on. The Tribune news crew had cameras positioned at 3 angles. The photographer moved through the crowd, capturing candid shots of Chicago's wealthiest donors. This was the charity event of the season. This was Vanessa's moment. At the edge of the crowd, near the service door, Zoe Rivers stood with Maria. Zoe wore the nicest dress she owned, dark blue with white flowers. Her natural hair was pulled back in careful braids. Maria kept a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" Maria whispered. Zoe nodded. Her eyes were locked on the helicopter. Vanessa raised her voice, cutting through the conversation. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for just a moment." The crowd quieted, turned toward her. "As you know, tonight is about supporting the Children's Hospital Foundation, but I wanted to add a special element to the evening, something memorable." She gestured toward the helicopter. The crowd's eyes followed. "Some of you may have heard about a little challenge I issued last week, and tonight we're going to see if it can be met." Murmurs rippled through the guests. Phones came out. The Tribune cameras adjusted position. Vanessa walked toward the H-145. "Antoine, would you join me, please?" The service door opened. Antoine stepped out onto the rooftop. He was still in his work coveralls, navy blue, worn at the knees, his name stitched above the chest pocket. His dark brown skin caught the evening light. His locks, threaded with silver, were pulled back. His face was calm, unreadable. He walked toward the helicopter without looking at the crowd. Laughter started small. A few chuckles. Then more. Guests leaned toward each other, whispering. Vanessa's smile widened. "Antoine has graciously accepted my challenge to fly this helicopter. And if he succeeds, well," she gestured to the altar, "I'm a woman of my word." The laughter grew louder. Someone raised their phone, filming. The Tribune cameras moved closer. Caleb Reed stood near the edge of the helipad, arms crossed, jaw tight. His eyes were on Antoine. Vanessa opened the passenger door of the H-445. She climbed inside with the ease of someone boarding a yacht, champagne glass still in hand. She settled into the seat, adjusted her dress, and smiled for the cameras. Antoine walked around to the pilot's side. He opened the door. Paused. For just a second, his hand rested on the door frame. His breathing changed, slowed, deepened. Then he climbed inside. The crowd quieted slightly. Anticipation mixed with amusement. They were waiting for the show. Antoine sat in the pilot's seat. His hands moved across the controls. Not tentative, not searching, certain. He flipped switches, checked gauges, adjusted the collective pitch. His fingers moved with the unconscious precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Caleb's hands uncrossed, dropped to his sides. The rotors began to turn. Slow at first, then faster. The familiar whoop, whoop, whoop of the blades cutting air. The laughter died. Antoine's left hand gripped the collective. His right hand settled on the cyclic stick. His feet found the pedals. And in that moment, sitting in that cockpit, he didn't look like a janitor anymore. He looked like exactly what he was. The helicopter lifted. Vertically, no drift, no wobble. Perfectly stable. Vanessa's smile flickered. Her champagne glass tilted slightly in her hand. She steadied it. Antoine banked the bird gently to the right. The movement was smooth, controlled. He took it out over the edge of the building, over Michigan Avenue, toward the lake. The crowd moved toward the railing. Phones raised. Cameras followed. The H-145 arced out over Lake Michigan in a sweeping, graceful turn. The sun caught the fuselage, turning it molten. Antoine brought it lower, executed a controlled banking turn that made the bird look like it was dancing. On the rooftop, no one was laughing anymore. Vanessa sat frozen in her seat, champagne glass gripped tight. Her smile was still fixed on her face, but her eyes had gone wide. Antoine brought the helicopter back toward the building. He dropped low, executed a nap of the earth pass along the shoreline that made the Tribune cameraman step back instinctively. Then he climbed. Smooth, steady, and began his descent. The approach was textbook, controlled. No corrections, no hesitation. He brought the bird down toward the landing pad, the rotor wash sending napkins and programs scattering across the rooftop. The skids touched down on the exact center of the marked zone. The champagne in Vanessa's glass didn't even ripple. The rotors began to wind down. The whoop 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 slowed, quieted, silence. Antoine killed the engine. The rotor stopped. He sat in the cockpit for a moment, hands still on the controls, breathing steady. Then he opened the door and stepped out. Vanessa climbed out of the passenger side. Her face was frozen somewhere between confusion and dread. Her smile had disappeared entirely. The crowd stood motionless. 200 people in evening wear, holding champagne, staring at a man in coveralls who'd just flown a $12 million helicopter like he'd been born in the sky. Caleb Reed stepped forward. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. That man isn't a janitor. The crowd didn't move. 200 people in evening wear stood frozen on a rooftop, staring at a man in coveralls beside a silent helicopter. Caleb Reed's voice carried across the space. Clear. Undeniable. That's Lieutenant Antoine Rivers, Coast Guard Air Station Elizabeth City. He saved more lives than anyone in this room will ever touch. The words landed like stones in still water. A woman near the front pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly. Within seconds, her screen lit up with search results. She tilted it toward the man beside her. He leaned in. His eyes widened. Another guest searched. Then another guest searched. Then another. Phones came out across the rooftop like a wave. The Tribune reporter pushed closer, camera still rolling. His lens stayed locked on Antoine's face. Vanessa stood near the altar, her designer gown catching the string lights. She tried to smile, tried to laugh. Well, that's quite a surprise, she said. Her voice was too bright. I had no idea our facilities manager had such an impressive background. No one laughed. A man in a tuxedo held up his phone. This is him. Lieutenant Antoine Rivers. 14 years of service. Multiple commendations. Search and rescue operations in Hurricane Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, and... That's fascinating, Vanessa interrupted. But let's not forget why we're here. The Children's Hospital Foundation. A voice cut through the crowd, young, sharp, unafraid. So, Ms. Kincaid, when's the wedding? Every head turned. The voice belonged to a woman in her late 20s, press badge clipped to her dress. Tribune junior reporter. Camera in hand. The question hung in the air. Every camera on the rooftop swung toward Vanessa. The main Tribune crew. Guest phones. The photographer she'd hired for the gala. The officiant stood beside the altar, vestments still on, suddenly very visible. Vanessa's face drained of color. Obviously, I was joking. You said I mean it on camera, the reporter interrupted. You brought an officiant. You promoted this as part of tonight's event. Guests began murmuring. Phones rose higher. Vanessa looked at Antoine, waiting for him to say something, to decline politely, to let her off the hook, to disappear. Antoine stood beside the helicopter, his coveralls still smelling faintly of industrial cleaner. His dark skin caught the glow of the string lights. His eyes met Vanessa's. He didn't look away. Then he stepped forward, not toward her, just into the space between them. His voice was quiet. But every person on that rooftop heard it. I don't want to marry you, Miss Kincaid. Vanessa's breath caught. I just wanted you to see who you humiliated. The rooftop went still. Antoine's voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It stayed steady, certain. The same voice that had given orders in hurricanes, the same voice that had talked people through rescue operations when they were terrified and drowning. You made that offer because you were certain I'd fail. You wanted to watch me fail. Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That says everything about you, Antoine continued, and nothing about me. He turned away from her, walked toward the edge of the crowd. Zoe stood there, her hands still gripped tight in Maria's. Her dark eyes were wide, shining. Antoine reached her, He knelt down to her level. His scarred hand touched her cheek. "You ready to go home, baby girl?" Zoe nodded. She couldn't speak, but she took his hand. Antoine stood. He looked at Maria. "Thank you for bringing her." Maria squeezed his shoulder. "Anytime." Antoine turned back toward the crowd one last time. Not to Vanessa, to everyone. "I'm going home to my daughter now." He walked toward the service door, Zoe beside him. Their hands linked. The Tribune cameras followed them all the way. The door closed behind them. For 5 full seconds, no one on the rooftop moved. Then the murmuring started. Low at first, then louder. Phones came out again. Not to search this time. To record, to share, to post. Vanessa stood alone near the altar. The officiant had already slipped away. The white flowers framed empty space. She tried to speak. To regain control. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could return our attention to the foundation." But people were already moving. Toward the exits. Toward the bar. Toward each other in tight clusters, phones out, voices rising. The Tribune reporter was live streaming, her voice carried across the rooftop. "We've just witnessed an extraordinary moment at the Glass Tower Charity Gala. What began as a publicity stunt has turned into something else entirely." Vanessa's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her dress. A board member approached. An older man, silver-haired. Expression unreadable. "Vanessa, we need to talk. First thing Monday morning." He walked away before she could respond. Another guest passed her without making eye contact. Then another. Vanessa stood in the center of the rooftop, surrounded by 200 people, and felt completely alone. By the time the first guest posted the video to social media, 15 minutes had passed. By the time it was shared 1,000 times, an hour. By the time it went viral, trending in 3 cities, the sun had set completely and the rooftop was empty except for event staff clearing champagne glasses and folding chairs. Vanessa stood by the window in her office on the 58th floor. The city spread out below her. Beautiful. Indifferent. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She turned it off. And in a small apartment in Pilsen, Antoine sat on the couch with Zoe curled against his side, her head on his shoulder. Both of them quiet, both of them breathing, both of them home. By Sunday morning, the video had been viewed 3 million times. The Chicago Tribune ran it as their lead story. The headline was simple, devastating. "Hotel heiress humiliates decorated Coast Guard hero, caught in her own marriage stunt." The article included Antoine's full service record. Photos of him in dress blues, testimonials from people he'd saved. The numbers, 27 lives. 14 years of service, multiple commendations, and footage of Vanessa standing on a rooftop, trapped by her own words, while a man in coveralls walked away with his daughter. Vanessa tried to spin it. She released a statement Monday morning claiming it had been a misunderstood publicity event, designed to honor a former serviceman. She called it performance art, with a message about recognizing hidden heroes. No one believed her. By Tuesday, the Glass Tower's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Vanessa sat at the head of the conference table on the 58th floor, her suit perfectly pressed, her face composed. Richard Holbrook, the board member who'd questioned her budget decisions, led the conversation. His voice was flat, clinical. "Your actions have damaged the hotel's reputation. Our donors are pulling funding. 3 events had been canceled. The PR fallout is catastrophic." "It was a charity event," Vanessa said. "The video is being taken out of context. You humiliated a decorated veteran on camera. There is no context that makes this acceptable." Vanessa's hands tightened on the armrests of her chair. "I gave him an opportunity. I made him visible." "You made yourself visible," Holbrook said. "That was always the goal, wasn't it?" The room was silent. "We're asking for your resignation," Holbrook continued. "Effective immediately." Vanessa looked around the table. No one met her eyes. She resigned that afternoon. Wednesday morning, her lawyer sent a letter to Antoine. It claimed he had operated hotel property without authorization. It threatened legal action for damages to the helicopter, liability concerns, and unauthorized use of company assets. Caleb Reed received a copy. He walked into the lawyer's office that same day with a folder. Inside, the email from Vanessa authorizing the flight, The maintenance logs showing the helicopter had been fueled and prepped per her instructions. A signed waiver from the event coordinator. The legal threat collapsed within 24 hours. The legal threat collapsed within 24 hours. Quietly. Without press. Antoine returned to work Monday morning. He clocked in at 4:15 a.m., same as always. But Maria hugged him in the kitchen. The maintenance crew shook his hand. People he'd never spoken to stopped him in the hallways to thank him. He worked his shifts. He picked up Zoe from school. He made dinner. But something had changed. 2 months later, a letter arrived at his apartment. Official letterhead, Chicago Fire Department, Air Operations Division. The letter was short. They'd seen the video. They'd verified his credentials. They were expanding their air ambulance program and needed experienced flight instructors. Would he be interested in an interview? Antoine sat at the kitchen table, the letter in his hands. Zoe leaned over his shoulder, reading. "Dad," she whispered, "you have to do it." He looked at her. Her dark eyes were bright, hopeful. "Yeah," he said. "I think I do." The interview was a formality. They knew who he was, what he'd done. The fire chief, a woman named Captain Sarah Okonkwo, shook his hand and said simply, "We'd be honored to have you." Antoine started 2 weeks later. Zoe enrolled in a youth aviation program at the Museum of Science and Industry. She learned to fly drones, to read wind patterns, to understand lift and drag and thrust. Every Sunday, Antoine picked her up from the program. She talked the entire drive home about what she'd learned. And every Sunday, Antoine listened. 3 months after the gala, on a cold November morning, Antoine stood on the tarmac at Chicago Fire Department Air Operations. The sky was gray. The wind cut sharp off the lake. It was the anniversary of Maya's death. Captain Okonkwo had cleared him for a solo training flight. She didn't ask why he wanted it. She just handed him the keys and said, "Take your time." Antoine climbed into the helicopter. An Airbus H-125. Smaller than the H-145, more agile. He ran the pre-flight check. His hands moved across the controls without thinking, muscle memory. It felt like coming home. The rotor spun up. He lifted off. He flew south, following the curve of the shoreline, then turned east over the lake. The water below was dark, choppy. The coordinates were burned into his memory. He didn't need a map. 32 miles offshore. The place where Maya's helicopter had gone down 10 years ago. He brought the bird to a hover. The wind buffeted the fuselage. The lake stretched out in every direction, endless and cold. Antoine sat in the silence. The rotors beat steady above him. He spoke, not loud, just enough to be heard. "Hey, Maya." The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't said her name out loud in years. "I should have done this a long time ago. I know that. I couldn't." The helicopter drifted slightly, he corrected. "Held position. Zoe's doing good. She's smart. Like you. She wants to fly. I think she will." He paused. "She asked me about you last week. Really asked," I told her. "Not everything, but enough." The wind shifted. The bird swayed. "I'm teaching again. Fire department. Air ambulance. Feels right." His voice caught. "I know you'd want me to be doing this. I know you never wanted me to disappear." He closed his eyes, took a breath. "I'm sorry it took me this long. I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry I let guilt keep me from living." He opened his eyes, looked out at the water. "But I'm back now, and I'm going to be okay. We both are." The rotors beat overhead, steady, constant. "Thank you," Antoine said. "For Zoe, for everything, for believing I could be more than I thought I was." He sat there for another minute. Then he pulled pitch and turned the bird west, back toward the city. The flight back was smooth, steady. He landed at Air Operations with the kind of precision that came from doing something 10,000 times. Captain Okonkwo was waiting on the tarmac. She didn't ask where he'd been, she just nodded. Antoine drove home. Zoe was on the balcony when he arrived, her homework spread across a small table. She looked up as he stepped outside. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, baby girl." He sat down beside her. The evening was cool. The city hummed below them. And overhead, a helicopter passed, its navigation lights blinking red and green against the darkening sky. Zoe watched it. Her eyes followed the bird until it disappeared. "Will you teach me to fly someday?" she asked. Antoine smiled. "Someday." She leaned against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. And they sat there together, watching the sky as the city lights came on one by one. and the world turned quietly toward night. True strength is not in proving yourself to those who doubted you, but in reclaiming your worth for those who always believed.